Hi, I'm Laura Coltis, your host for Arts Delight. On this week's show, we actually have two guests. Bob Wakeham will interview his longtime friend Donna, who's the artistic director of the Rising Tide Theatre in Trinity. This year marks the 25th year of the arrival of Rising Tide in Trinity and also marks Donna's 40th year in theatre. When we return, Bob will talk to Donna about when it all started with the Mummers Troupe in St. John's.
This show is brought to you by the Craft Council of Newfoundland and Labrador. Visit us in our new space at 275 Duckworth Street and discover what it means to be handcrafted.
Welcome back. Let's listen to Bob Wakeham's interview of Rising Tide's Donna.
So Donna, I'm told that by my crack research team that this marks the 40th anniversary of your start in the theatrical business, and quite a milestone, obviously, and you've stayed half sane through it all somehow. But I'm just wondering, when you think back, Donna, to that first year, what do you remember most?
Well, I think with Rising Tide Theatre, the thing I remember most is our first show, because our first play was Daddy, What's a Train? And my dad had worked with the railway all of his life. Really I had gotten a great deal from my father, a great love of Newfoundland and Labrador. He was incredibly well-read, loved Newfoundland and all things Newfoundland and Labrador, and he instilled that love of that in me, the importance of place, of belonging, of understanding your culture, your politics. That was a very important thing in our family. So I think that's what stands out for me, that my dad had worked really hard to save the railway and was, I think, treated very badly. I think the railway was treated very badly. And I saw what that did. I saw what it did to him. I saw what it did to many of the people who worked there. So that is my memory of I think of my father, who's passed away. But that is my strongest memory, is us coming together to do a show that gave voice to something that had happened in our place. And that has been really, in many ways, my life's work, to give voice to the things that have happened here, and usually to tell it from the point of view of the working person. That's how I grew up. That's what I grew up with. That's what I know and understand. And that's the story that we have told. And I guess it kind of brought me back to the first time I worked with the Mummers. I will never forget the horror of my mother and father. I was the oldest child, very bright in school, did very well, A student. And there were great hopes for, I would go to university, which was something my dad was never able to do. There was so excitement about that. And when I said I was going to go on a gray bus around Newfoundland and do a show about Newfoundland history, I remember my father saying, "This is not quite what I had in mind when I taught you to love Newfoundland and Labrador." So this is not where I thought it would turn out.
Did you manage to win them over? Or was there a certain point where your mother and father said, "Yes, indeed, we're really glad that she didn't become a well-paid doctor or a lawyer, that she went into theater and went into political theater and has done something that we're very proud of"? Did you turn them around at some point?
I think that, people have told me that, they were proud of what I was able to achieve. And I will say this, that he came to Daddy, What's a Train? And when we remounted it a few years ago out in Trinity for our 30th anniversary, my dad was well enough to come out and so on and so forth. And Mom and Dad were there in the front row in Trinity. He loved Trinity. He loved the pageant. He loved the whole idea and concept of all of that. Both my mom and dad did. So I think they came to feel that and believe, and I hope other people in the province believe, that the work that we have done, both before Trinity and certainly in Trinity, has meant something to the people of the province and meant something both culturally and economically, because we have also been an economic generator. And you know, when Rick Bolin and I first went to Trinity with the pageant, with that whole concept. It was just after the COD moratorium. And my interest was both, you know, we wanted both to present our story and also to have a positive impact somehow on the economics of our region. Now, not to suggest that the theater, or for that matter tourism, can replace the fishery or its role or its value. It cannot. That's foolishness to even suggest such a thing. But what we hopefully have been able to do is give some you know, some hope, some place, some work for people, and also to honor the people who came before us. And that was perhaps the most important. And my mom and dad did come to see every show. And he also loved the reviews. He never missed review. They never missed review anywhere either.
When you first went to Trinity, you and Rick, did you think at the time that it was, could you envision at the time that it would last for 25 years? Or was it kind of was it an experiment on your part, or did you think of it as being a one-off?
Well, when we went, the idea was, because there was some restoration being done out there by both levels of government, and there was a very strong and active Trinity Historical Society. And so when we went, it was to do the pageant, the outdoor, it's a large outdoor historical play that tells the history up to 1832 from in that area. When we went there, it was to do that pageant. But I had already had a large sheet on a very messy office where you can't really, I had to put it on the wall because you can not see anything on the desks. And it was to create a festival of Newfoundland work in a place where it would really have a special meaning, because it would come from the sea and the land and the landscape and the stories and the ghosts, I suppose, in a strange way, of anybody who had walked there before us. And that's where I want. So when we went to Trinity, I was so, obviously it's beauty is magnificent. It's undisputed. Also, I had gotten to know a number of the people, because we had hired a lot of people originally who were had been working in the fish plants and so on and so forth. And so I had come to really value them and care about them and respect them. And they said, "You'll never be back." And that made me really, really determined. But that first year, I think people thought we were crazy, frankly.
When we come back, we'll talk more about some of the cynicism they initially had to face when they came to Trinity.
This show is brought to you by the Craft Council of Newfoundland and Labrador. Visit us in our new space at 275 Duckworth Street and discover what it means to be handcrafted.
The term cultural tourism didn't exist when Rising Tide first came to Trinity. There was no doubt it was groundbreaking and also challenging to get it off the ground.
So you were starting to say there, Donna, that some of the people there were saying, "Oh, you won't be back."
Yeah, I think they were. I mean, the people that we had, you know, worked with, and I think there was perhaps a certain cynicism, perhaps a feeling that. You know, we were on the cusp of it then. The word cultural tourism didn't even exist. I mean, I don't even know who created that word. And at some point we were called cultural tourism, many of us, but it didn't exist then. We were simply trying to recreate the history of our place in a way so that it could be shared with people from all over the world. We were trying to do it in a very dignified way with integrity. And we were trying to have some kind of positive impact on the economy of a rural region that had been absolutely hit so hard by the Northern Cod moratorium. So that's what we were trying to do. And I wanted people to believe that something can happen, that things can be built. If people work hard, they work together, they have a vision. I mean, I did have a vision of what I wanted it to be. I don't know that very many people really believed it would last this long and we would now be there with our own theater built and our own home there, that I, you know, would be living there. But it did, and it can if people pull together.
Now, you said there was a certain amount of cynicism there.
There was.
And was there also, I've always wanted to ask you this, actually.
Yeah.
Was there any distrust on the part of the people there thinking to themselves, here she comes in now, this high-profile woman from town, coming here to tell us, people around the Bay, what our history is all about. Did you have to deal with anything along those lines?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And how did you combat that?
I've got like hundreds of scars, not physical, but definitely emotional.
And how did you fight it? How did you combat it?
Well, you know, I don't know that I ever won everybody over, but I just was determined. I believed in what we were doing. I knew I was surrounding myself with some of the best people, great people in the region and wonderful people in the theatrical community. And I just, you know, I remember when we first went there, that when I started hearing people talk, at first I thought, they really don't like us. I remember Doug saying, you know, who was matey in the pageant for 20 years, and he'd come to work with us. Never did anything like this in his life. He's actually thought he was applying as a carpenter, and we ended up putting him in as an actor. And I remember standing outside the parish hall one day, and you know, Rick and I had been going back, and we'd been there trying to get the pageant up, trying to teach people how to, you know, do the pageant. And I remember saying, "So what do you think about it so far?" And Doug said, "Worst thing I ever had to do to get me stamps." And I thought, this isn't going to go well. Maybe I'm just going to get in the car and go back and think, we don't belong here. And you know, there were lots of times, but Doug stayed for 20 years and we have remained, you know, great friends and great colleagues ever since. So he came to, I remember another time we were driving out to a lighthouse, and it was the most magnificent, spectacular view in the world. This was in the early days, the second year when I went back to build the festival. And we were driving along and it was just gorgeous. And I said, "Oh my God, it is so magnificent here." And Doug said, "You townies that see beauty anywhere." So I think that what I came to understand was that, you know, we all see that place through our eyes. And what most that we could do was try to bring together as many eyes and as many voices as we could, and try to be true to what we set out to do. You know, I think that culture is a tricky thing, because culture belongs to everybody, and everybody has it, and everybody defines it differently. So sometimes it is very tricky being part of a cultural scene, and also part of being an economic generator and being a professional theater company. So, you know, these have been very, very tight rope lines to walk. They really, really have. And anybody who thinks that they aren't difficult, they're wrong, because not everybody wants their culture turned into a resource. Not everybody wants their culture, would want to feel that who's defining their culture. So what I've always felt is that we are one of the voices, and that I didn't just go and leave, that it was really important to me to commit to a place, to stay there, to put down roots. Are you ever from there? Nope. I've lived there full time. We went there in 1993, we did the first pageant. I have lived there full time from 1997. Am I still that woman? Yes, I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure for lots of people that will always be the case. But you know, you embrace what you can. You try to be thoughtful of where you are, and you still have to hold true to what your own strengths are as well.
Well, you got those, as you say, a fair number of invisible scars.
Yep.
When you were trying to convince the people in Trinidad that what you were doing there was above board and would be to their benefit. I'm curious as to, throughout your career, I mean, you were involved in a career that was had to have been emotionally draining at times, financially draining.
Yep.
A lot of big egos, a lot of conflict. Was there any
all of that?
All of that. Was there ever a time, Donna, when you said, "This is just too much. I'm out of here. I'm going to become a a lawyer like my mom and dad wanted me to become? Or was there ever a time when you actually threatened to yourself to walk away from it all?
Yeah, there were a couple of times, and interesting enough, one of them was in the whole sort of mummer story, which I won't go into, but it was a tough, very tough time, and we were all young, we were driven, we were emotional, and it was a very hard time. There were great high moments with the mummers troupe, and there was also some real difficulty. So I think then I felt that I would leave it. And oddly enough, I got a call from Michael Cook, whom I didn't know really well, who is passed away, but was a great Newfoundland playwright and teacher, and wanted me to come to Montreal to do Teresa's Creed, because whoever was there he felt couldn't do it right. And Michael was in his cups when he phoned me, and I was terrified. But anyway, I decided that I would go and do it. And that kind of drew me back to something that I kind of realized why I had chosen that forum, that I had chosen that tool, that instrument to tell this, to talk about the place in which I lived. And so I went back. And then the next time I had sort of felt like, I think it's time to move on and try to find something else, some other meaningful way to contribute, was just before we went to Trinity. And I kind of thought, I don't know what else I have to give now. And then we went to Trinity, and I was suddenly able to bring together both the theater and the culture and the economic and the rural, the reality of rural Newfoundland and Labrador and the history that I had grown up with. I kind of felt I could bring all of those together and create extraordinary teams of people, give young people a place to work, all those sorts of things. And I found a new reason to do it.
Being an independent director with a vision is never an easy road. After these short messages, Donna will talk to us about the highs and the lows of it all.
This show is brought to you by the Craft Council of Newfoundland and Labrador. Visit us in our new space at 275 Duckworth Street and discover what it means to be handcrafted.
Bob Wakeham's interview of Donna Bott continues as she talks about the times when it all almost came apart.
So the fabric of these communities have changed enormously. And I think that one of the true challenges in the next few years is to find and define what rural Newfoundland and Labrador, I speak mostly of the island because it's what I know a bit, what those communities are going to be, who is going to populate them, will they be year-round communities, especially the smaller ones? What will we be able to hold on to of what rural Newfoundland truly was? And I think that there's a debate to happen and a lot of conversation, a lot of work to be done to see what the future of rural Newfoundland.
Do you see yourself as part of that discussion and part of that exploration? Because I've wondered about this. You're obviously, because of my vintage, so you're in your 60s.
Yeah.
So have you ever thought at some point you're just going to say, I can't go there anymore. I've done my part. I've done enough. And I mean, it's hard to imagine you sitting in a rocking chair with a glass of wine looking out at the ocean. But do you think at some point you're just going to say, that's it, I'm going to really stop and smell the roses?
I don't think I'm going to stop and smell the roses. It's kind of not my thing. You know, I mean, I don't even know how to mow my lawn, right? Like, smelling roses is probably not in my future, and I can't knit. So sitting in a rocking chair probably isn't either. I can read, but, and do a great deal. I don't think, you know, I may not, obviously I can't run Rising Tide forever, you know, but I give lots of thought to making sure that the company is strong and that others will be able to take it on, to keep it going and keep it a part of the fabric of the place. I don't necessarily think I would ever stop trying to contribute in some way. I mean, it sounds kind of corny, but it really is who I am. And also, you know, part of the reason my parents and my family were so concerned and remain concerned about me being involved in the arts is, of course, you don't really own anything in the end. There's no pension. You don't own the company. It's a nonprofit theater company. I watch all the incredible people who came and built places as well in the Trinity Bight area. You know, a beautiful, you know, B&Bs and restaurant, and extraordinary. And a number of them have been able to then, I've watched the next generation now because I'm getting so old, pass that down to their children. The Gows, the Fishers, many like that. And it's extraordinary. But if you run a nonprofit theater company all your life, and including in Trinity, you don't own anything, you don't have a pension, you never made a lot of money, so you have very little money in the bank. So there is a certain sacrifice. And, you know, my parents were always worried about that. And, you know, I'm not crying over it because you choose your life. You make those choices, and there's no point looking back now and saying, you know, I wish I'd made another one. But I would ask the people, I hope the people of the province and the government of this province really understands the tremendous role that their artists and also people who work for any nonprofit company make to the economy, to the culture, to the very fiber of the place, because there are sacrifices made to do that. And while they often say, and you'll hear government say, oh, we love our artists, well, loving us isn't quite enough. You know, I'm not going to be sitting back at 75 with no pension and no money and be glad that you love me so much. Thanks. But, you know, I have had moments of great lows in fearing and wondering about what we do, if it's understood, how it's considered. And I've also had moments of tremendous highs and thousands of embraces, both from people from Newfoundland at the end of the pageant, or the other night at the end of Teresa's Creed, there was, you know, which I do, the one-woman show, and there were people from away, and they said, we will never forget this. And then there were a couple from Bishop's Falls who said, we will never forget this. Thank you.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
But Donna, and I don't know if the government will ever appreciate what people like you have done, at least to the extent that they should. But I will tell you, at the risk of sounding awfully patronizing, that people like me have appreciated what you have done, and realize what an incredible contribution you've made to Newfoundland. And so good on you.
Thank you.
And thanks for doing this.
I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next week.